Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming in and having this discussion with us about infrastructure this morning, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it.
This is great.
I guess the first thing I'd like to know is, obviously there are a lot of issues that the next mayor and council are going to have to deal with and are going to have on your plate. What I want to know is, I guess, if you were elected, where is infrastructure going to rank for you in terms of the issues that you're going to have, that you're going to want to be dealing with as mayor? Like, where is it in terms of that issue hierarchy?
It's the number one issue we're hearing at the doorsteps. We've been out door knocking now for about 2 months, and it is without question the number one issue, closely followed by trust and integrity. I think what people are looking for is they're looking for more honesty. They're looking for a change in the tone and the dialogue. We've had a really poisonous environment at City Hall that has delayed us on moving forward on a number of issues, including infrastructure. And so they do go hand in hand, and that's why I'm being clear about my infrastructure priorities in my long-term vision as well as short-term steps and how we get there. And that's really important for the entire community to know in their next mayor what the priorities are, and they can trust that I'm not going to flip-flop on the issue, that I'm going to be consistent and steadfast in seeing this through, because that's the type of leadership that's been lacking at City Hall for some time.
In terms of infrastructure, what is infrastructure is a broad category, obviously. What would you specifically prioritize within that in terms of trying to fix infrastructure?
Well, there's the three main areas that I look at when I think of transportation infrastructure in particular is roads, public transit, and active transportation or cycling. And those three should be coordinated better, and they should be used as a means of promoting economic development and growth in Winnipeg. My vision for Winnipeg is a city of 1 million people, and everything that I'm doing during this campaign and everything I will do if elected mayor will be to promote a city that is growing, that is thriving, that is more modern, and infrastructure is integral to doing that.
Mm-hmm. So what specifically in that, in terms of if you get elected,
Sure.
What'll be the first thing that you would try to invest in or try to make sure that you're addressing?
Well, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the Build Winnipeg Partnership. This is something that I've proposed during the campaign. You can visit it and see more details on our website, which is bowmanforwinnipeg.ca. But basically what I identified was 3 main problems that have been holding us back for truly moving forward for transportation infrastructure, coordination, and investments. One is there's been way too much political interference and really small scale political grandstanding that's been going on and interference. The second thing is that there's been ad hoc measures by different levels of government. And the third thing is that there's been really a lack of coordination between roads, public transit, and active transportation investments, and we need to solve that. So what the Build Winnipeg Partnership does is it brings together the various stakeholders, including inviting representatives from the province and from the federal government, from Winnipeg Transit, the active transportation community, public works and planning, get them around the table and manage the Build Winnipeg Fund, which consolidates the existing revenues and allows us to have a united front when we're seeking out new funds, in particular from the Government of Canada for the Build Canada Fund. And so what we need to do is we need to take a look at the existing plans that are there. I don't think that we need to spend a lot of time planning or doing, coming up with new plans. Mm-hmm. We've got some good plans there. Let's consolidate them. Let's have a 10-year plan. Let's have this Build Winnipeg Partnership review and actually have the power to make those, to come forward with a strategic plan to council that's approved, the budget's provided, and then the Build Winnipeg Partnership would be tasked with implementing. So we get the politicians out of the way, we have better coordination between different levels of government, and we also have better coordination between the various investments needed for road, public transit, and active transportation investments.
Why specifically do you think that model will do a better job of identifying these priorities and getting these things done as opposed to what's happening now? Like what is it about that particular piece of it that's going to...
Well, I want to get the politics out of the way. Right now, the biggest barrier to... you look at the mess that we're in. The mess we're in is because of a variety of factors, but the most glaring that we can see by just picking up the newspaper any day over the last decade has been political interference. The politics is getting in the way, and that's one of the reasons why I'm running, because I think there's a better way. I want to get in there, provide the leadership, give people the tools to actually make decisions and proceed with a number of important developments for Winnipeg. And that's probably the number one barrier to moving forward on having a coordinated and coherent vision and plan for transportation infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. But when you're dealing with the federal and provincial governments in particular. I mean, that's one of the more, important things. I mean, politics, I imagine, would be a part of that. So how do you plan to work with senior levels of government in order to be able to address some of these challenges and to be able to better plan and finance infrastructure in Winnipeg?
Well, I mean, and that's what the Build Winnipeg Partnership is all about. It's about inviting these very important stakeholders. The province is probably the most important stakeholder that we need to have better coordination with. And that's why I'm not just, trying to score cheap and short-term political points during an election, beating up on the province. I've created a vehicle where we can actually collaborate and work together. I don't care which party is in after the next election, we're going to have to work with them. And I have a demonstrated track record in my volunteer work on behalf of the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce and the Winnipeg Art Gallery of being able to work with our current provincial government and whomever is in there after the next provincial election. That's one of the most important relationships that the next mayor is going to have to deal with. And that's why I've proposed the Build Winnipeg Partnership. So that I've actually proposed a tangible vehicle to getting us sitting around the table together so we can make some of these decisions in collaboration with some of these important partners.
Mm-hmm. Is there to what extent is there a regional component to the Build Winnipeg Partnership that you've proposed? I mean, because obviously Winnipeg is part of an economic region and we're surrounded by a number of municipalities and, there's different, obviously different infrastructure priorities that don't just impact the city, but the broader City of Winnipeg region. So how would that work in terms of being able to coordinate that on a regional basis?
Well, and that's why provincial representation is so important. Build Winnipeg Partnership could choose to seek input from our important stakeholders around the City of Winnipeg, especially in terms of regional roads. You're right.
Would they have a place as part of that? Or
I haven't proposed that they would have a formal seat at the table. That's really the role of the provincial government to help us coordinate. But I'd certainly be open to greater collaboration through this vehicle, but I haven't proposed a formal seat at the table.
Right, okay.
At the end of the day, and I should just say, the reason is that I'm running for Winnipeg, and I want to make sure that this vehicle serves the best interests of Winnipeg, recognizing, of course, that the regional roads and feeders into Winnipeg are important for Winnipeg's economic growth and development, but that's of course why the provincial government would be invited to join.
Right. How will you financially tackle the infrastructure deficit that we have in our city? I mean, you talked about the planning and coordination being better, having all the partners at the table, but what about the financial piece of it? How are we going to pay for this?
Do you want to be a little bit more specific? Are you talking about road infrastructure, or just generally how are we going to tackle the okay.
You have a plan or an idea in place in terms of how to deal, and obviously the infrastructure deficit encompasses a lot. But what measures will you take for financially to be able to address this?
Yeah, I mean at the outset, what I recognize is we can't tax our way out of the massive infrastructure deficit that the politicians who have been there for some time have left us with. They have not done a good job in planning, in creating the structures necessary, and somebody new needs to get in there to dig us out of the hole that we're in. There is not enough taxpayers, there's not enough tax dollars to be able to massively increase the taxes to the tune that we would need in order to make a meaningful impact. The only way we're going to deal with the long-term infrastructure deficit is to grow our way out of. We have to have a robust economic development. We need an increase in our population, and we need smart developments so that the municipal government is getting better bang for the buck. And so that's the only way that we're going to deal with it in the long term. And so I've already proposed, in terms of finances, I've proposed a number of initiatives throughout this campaign. I'm going to be making other even more substantive announcements on where the funds come from to pay for the infrastructure deficit that we're in. The ones that I've already discussed are the City of Winnipeg doing a 2% efficiency review on a department basis, excluding first responders and excluding job layoffs. Mm-hmm. That was the first one. I noted that Judy criticized that, and I thought that was unfortunate. This is a reasonable approach to look inward to see where we can find better cost savings, and we're going to have much more to say on that throughout the campaign. The second thing, of course, is the 1% raise in the PST was brought in supposedly to direct those funds towards dealing with the infrastructure deficit. Now, last year alone, the City of Winnipeg contributed $154 million to that 1% increase in the PST. The provincial government, though, gave us $50 million back, and they've dedicated $50 million on a go-forward basis. So as the economic growth and development happens, and as that $154 million grows, we need a more fair share of that. I'd like to see 100% of that. That's why I've proposed the Build Winnipeg partnership. I want to have those conversations with the provincial government around the table together, eyeball to eyeball. But the reality is that we need that money. That's about $100 million a year that we should be getting over the next 10 years. That would be at least $1 billion in transportation, or in infrastructure-related spending that should be coming into the city of Winnipeg that isn't right now. And I'm not going to accept the status quo. We need to step up and say that we need our fair share in order to do that. And I'm going to be proposing a vehicle this afternoon in terms of long-term taxation structures and how we can grow our way out of the infrastructure deficit as well.
No one's going to see this until after.
Oh, great.
That comes
Okay.
out. So if you want to elaborate
Sure,
on that.
yeah, no,
that
I'd
would
be happy
that would
to.
be great,
Yeah, okay. I mean, the one thing that I'm going to be proposing today is essentially that the form of taxation that the city is largely dependent upon, which is property taxes, is antiquated. Mm-hmm. It is an old school counter-growth form of taxation that has to end. And so I will be leading a discussion, if given the chance to serve as Winnipeg's next mayor, at the municipal level, but also within the province of Manitoba with our other municipalities, on a process of eliminating property taxes as a vehicle. It's counter-growth, it doesn't make sense, and it's leaving us in the situation where we have to just jack up property taxes in order to deal with the infrastructure deficit, and we can't do that. It's just not sustainable. So I'm going to be proposing that we start a discussion, and I'm going to lead it on vehicles, including a municipal sales tax.
Well, I was going to say, what's your preferred alternative?
Yeah,
in terms of
that
being
would
able to replace that money.
Municipal sales tax would be my preferred. It's not an easy solution because the challenge with the municipal sales tax is there are renters, there are people that are in low income that if you just brought it in without carefully planning and without proper dialogue with the provincial government, and also just bringing it in a thoughtful way, you have to make sure that those individuals who would be adversely affected are thought through in how it's rolled out.
Rebates or something, I suppose.
Yeah,
right?
something has to give, but what I want to do is I want to create an incentive for the municipal government to really focus on economic development. And one of the ways you can do that is get some skin in the game. As economic growth occurs, the city should be funded properly so that we can deal with our own house. Right now, we have to go cap in hand to the province. We have to go back cap in hand to the taxpayer. And it's not sustainable. And I'm disappointed that the politicians that have been there year after year after year haven't had the political courage or vision to even initiate that discussion. And I'm going to do that during this campaign. And if I'm given the chance to serve, I'm going to fight for that because it's something that's crucial to dealing with the infrastructure deficit that they've left us with.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, the devil, I suppose, would probably be in the details in terms of how much money ends up replacing, and then also not only that, but whether that money will actually be able to go to address the infrastructure deficit. I guess, what makes you think that this will be able to be something that actually does end up addressing the infrastructure deficit in the long term if we're going to transition from sort of a property tax-based system to something based more on sales tax, growth taxes, those kinds of things?
Well, I mean, part of it's not a one size fits all, and that's going to be the magic bullet, but it's going to be part of the solution. The other part is that we have smart growth. We need to increase our density. We need transit-oriented developments in Winnipeg that are focused on economic development. The priority for me also in terms of when you actually get down to the repairs, I want to see road repairs focused on those routes and those core assets that we have in our infrastructure, arsenal. Well, I'd like to see a focus on regional roads and roads within the city of Winnipeg that are integral to our economic development. So, I mean, the easy example would be Centerport, investments that feed and will help promote the growth and development of Centerport as a more robust economic development area of the city.
One of the ways that municipal governments will often end up financing some of these major infrastructure projects, of course, is through public-private partnerships. What's your stance on that? Is that something that you would look at as a way of trying to be able to get some of the major infrastructure, pieces of infrastructure built?
The short answer is yes. What I'd like to see is all vehicles leveraged to the benefit of Winnipeg. Look, there's candidates on the far right and the far left in this campaign, and they're going to be making decisions based on ideology. I want to make decisions based on what's right for Winnipeggers and what's right for the future of our city. And if that involves private sector, public sector, partnerships, we got to look at them as viable vehicles. And I'm open to anything that can move us forward as a city.
What about, I mean, some of the other ideas that get thrown out sometimes are, different, sort of more fee-based things in terms of being able to pay for infrastructure, so like, tolls, congestion charges, some of those sorts of things. What about some of those? I mean, are those things that you would look at implementing?
You know what? All the candidates were asked by the Free Press in an editorial, you may recall, to consider mobility pricing as a vehicle to fund infrastructure, transportation infrastructure. We looked at that. I don't think that's the right vehicle. I think there's too many problems with how you actually enforce it and roll it in. A municipal sales tax does address that, so that if there are individuals that are living and residing outside of Winnipeg, but they come into Winnipeg to work and to play and to spend money at everything from Jets and Bombers games to going out to movies, when they come into Winnipeg and they're spending money, I want to be able to capture that to help pay for the wear and tear on the infrastructure that they're causing. And I don't think that's unreasonable. You look at growth-oriented taxes, we've got PST, GST at the other two levels of government. Cities matter, and cities need to be funded properly, and this is one vehicle in which we could provide us with the funding that we need to actually deal with the infrastructure deficit. The current framework is just not going to cut it. So somebody's got to lead the discussion on what can we fundamentally change, and that's what I'm doing during this campaign.
One of the things, that was looked at, I guess it would have been a few years ago now, of course, was the Infrastructure Funding Council report that was done by the city and Manitoba Heavy Construction Association. So, that there's that's there on the shelf as part of, some ideas in terms of being able to address some of these infrastructure challenges. I'm just wondering, that report contains a number of recommendations. What would you do as mayor to try to be able to implement some of those?
Well, the first thing is let's set up the Build Winnipeg partnership, because right now, if we keep the politics going the way that they're going, it is going to sit on the shelf and it's not going to get implemented properly. And so that's why it's so crucial that the Build Winnipeg partnership become a reality, so that we can get the politics out of it, and where there are plans that make sense, they can be incorporated into the 10-year plan that the Build Winnipeg partnership would be responsible for implementing.
Anything else that is related to that report that you would look at trying to implement? That's obviously something. I think there's a link between Build Winnipeg and the way that obviously that idea flows out of it. But
well, there's been lots of great work that have come out of the Manitoba Heavy Construction Association and other groups that's what I want to pull in for consideration by the Build Winnipeg partnership. The focus for me really, though, is, and I can't emphasize this enough, is on economic growth and development. We have to grow our way out of the infrastructure deficit, and we need the tools in order to do it, and we need the processes in order to implement the plans that are sitting on the shelves. And that's why I want to give the Build Winnipeg partnership the authority to actually implement. Right now, it gets bogged down at City Hall, and that's not working, clearly. And I think it's time for a change in that regard.
We've been talking mostly about core infrastructure. The way the IFC report and other reports deal with it, of course, core being streets, roads, pipes, social infrastructure being the recreation facilities, libraries, some of those other sorts of things that the city finances, and they're part of our infrastructure as well. What would you say as far as your plan to address some of the needs on that side of it, in terms of and also in terms of balancing that against obviously there's needs in the core infrastructure, that's what most people focus on, but the social piece of it, what can you say about that?
Well, obviously, I don't think you get anybody being asked that question to say they're not important. It is important on a human level. It's also important that everybody in every area of the city be given the opportunities to grow as individuals. I've got young kids, and we're using the community centers on an almost daily basis right now, and they are important. For me, the focus on when it comes to community centers in particular is getting better value for the dollars that are invested, and trying to create the resources to help many of the volunteers who actually make the community centers function. And so we're looking at that as well as making sure the funding is appropriate. But let me go back to the need for a change in the tax structure, because right now, if we just have property taxes as the primary vehicle by which we're going to fund infrastructure for core as well as for community centers and other infrastructure pieces, we're just not going to be able to do it. And we're going to be having the same discussion in the next election, and the next election, and the next election. And so my primary competitors in this election have been around for a very long time, and they failed to lead on this issue and to get the discussion going to actually move it forward. And that's what I'm doing during this campaign, and that's why we do need to have a discussion about whether or not property taxes is the right vehicle, and I don't think they are. So we do need a long-term focus on getting rid of property taxes as the primary vehicle by which we fund the city. I can't promise to eliminate them during this campaign, and so what I am promising is to raise property taxes no more than the rate of inflation. I don't think freezing property taxes is the way to go. That's part of the reason why we haven't had the money to fix our roads, and it's not sustainable. But in the long term, we do need to lead on this discussion, because nobody's been doing it to date, certainly in Manitoba, and we think it's time at the political level to lead.
Well, I guess it's been a number of years, I guess, since you'd probably go back to like the Glen Murray era when that was discussed in terms of the New Deal, and that ended up not working out. What makes you think that it may be different this time, that there may be more of an appetite to be able to fundamentally change the way that municipalities raise revenue?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the population is ready for it, and we're hearing that at the doors. There is a real appetite for change, and I think that's why we've been really pleased that we've been able to double our support in your poll and other polls over the course of this campaign. And while others have stalled, the reason they've stalled is because they do represent the same old. And what I represent is a change. If people want to change, they can help us out, and we can help the city. And I'm ready to work for the city to offer a true change in the dynamic. People are ready for it, and we're hearing that at the doors. When it comes to infrastructure, in the last couple of years, we're seeing the results of the tax freeze that we've had, and the lack of vision and the lack of leadership that we've had at City Hall for many, many years. And we're seeing it in brown water. We're seeing it in what's in frozen pipes. We're seeing it in the drive to work. And I think there's a growing recognition that we need new leadership. We need new processes in place. That's where the Build Winnipeg partnership comes in. And we need the new models for taxation that are smarter, that can help us grow our way out of the infrastructure deficit. And that's why I'm proposing to lead that discussion on eliminating our over reliance on property taxes as the primary vehicle by which we fund infrastructure and other services.
Anything else you want to add that I didn't cover?
No, I would encourage you and anyone else watching this video to learn more about these plans that I've discussed and other policies at bowmanforwinnipeg.ca. And
Okay.
Thanks very much for doing this.
Yeah,
I
great.
really appreciate the fact that you're asking these questions, and the Heavy Construction Association is also leading. So I've spent a lot of time speaking with Chris Lawrence over the years in my capacity as chair of the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce, and throughout the campaign we've been closely following the work of the association, and they do great work. So I'll look forward to continuing to work with him if given the chance
Okay.
to serve as mayor.
Great. Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Brian.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thanks
it.
a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it.